Navon, international relations expert. Dr. Navon, thank you for being with us. And has anything changed this week regarding last week? For now, it's strong in the headlines, maybe because of this comment that Vice President Mike Pence said. But is it really on the table? Is President Donald Trump really considering now the move?
Well, first of all, there's a deadline coming up in early December. The president will have to decide whether or not he's signing the waiver again, not to move the embassy. And this is why you have this pressure going on. But as you mentioned also before, there was the speech of Vice President Pence about the 29th of November, marking the 70th anniversary of the vote of partition at the UN, and also the pressure from the evangelicals on Trump and on Pence also. This deadline is coming up, so therefore the topic is coming up. But this, I would call this joke, has been going on for 22 years, where on the one hand you have this law from Congress.
Move the embassy, but don't move the embassy.
But don't move the embassy. It's been going on for 22 years. So for 22 years, every 6 months, all U.S. presidents have used their waiver not to move the embassy. And by the way, those decisions belong to the executive in America. Anything to do with foreign policy, at the end of the day, whether it's to move an embassy or anything to do with, as I said, foreign policy, it is the jurisdiction of the president and not of Congress.
So we're now hearing also that King Abdallah of Jordan is in Washington holding talks and trying to convince Congress members that this is not the right move, certainly not at this timing. Will there ever be a good timing to make such a move? We know that Jerusalem is a very delicate, sensitive issue. Always has been, probably always will be.
Well, first of all, there has to be a decision from all the sides. You mentioned the King of Jordan, but also from the United States, from Israel and the Palestinians on the final status of Jerusalem. And as we know, this is the heart of the matter, that the final status is, of course, disputed among the parties, including by Jordan. By the way, you also have this historical struggle between Jordan and the Palestinians over the control, the holy sites, the Muslim sites in the old city of Jerusalem. So obviously, as far as Jordan is concerned, they don't want any PLO jurisdiction on East Jerusalem, so they want to push off things. Everybody basically wants to push off the decision to keep the status quo. The Jordanian, by the way, during 1949 and 67, when the city was divided, there was a de facto cooperation between Jordan and Israel to keep the city divided and not to go back to the international status that had been voted by the UN.
By the UN resolution, which we all commemorated yesterday on November 29th. President Trump made this promise of the embassy move a couple of times and quite strongly in his campaign, more than previous presidents who also made this promise. Does it put more pressure on him, or at the end of the day, that was campaign, and as we say in Israeli politics, what you see during the campaign is not what you see while you're in office?
I think in the case of President Trump, definitely there's more, as we said already, pressure from the evangelicals. But on the other hand, he also has been insisting since his election a year ago that he wants to push a peace initiative for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And I'd be very surprised if he would move the embassy before at least trying to present a plan to both parties, because obviously this would be used as an excuse by the Palestinians not to negotiate, not to come to the negotiating table. So I very much doubt that he would take such a decision before at least presenting the peace plan he's been talking about.
Well, we'll have to wait till early next week to see what happens. And perhaps on the same issue, Israeli officials are furious at the organizers of the prestigious Giro d'Italia bicycle race, which will begin next spring. With 3 stages in Israel, the controversy comes after it was announced that the race would begin with a time trial in West Jerusalem. Israeli officials are threatening to drop the partnership with the event because of the wording, adding that Jerusalem is the Israeli capital and there is no East and West but a united city. Organizers have tried to steer clear of politics in creating the route and said the race will not go through any land considered disputed by the international community. I will take my position as a sports fan here and say, what are the Israeli officials really thinking? I mean, there is a big race coming to Israel. We know the issue of Jerusalem is controversial. And yes, the race begins in West Jerusalem. Geographically, it's the western part of the city where it begins. What did they expect, the Giro d'Italia organizers, to say, yes, we will start in East Jerusalem? They know it's a problem.
Right, so it's interesting in what you mentioned that the organizers of the Giro, they said, we don't want to have anything to do with politics.
Welcome to Israel.
Right, first of all, yes, welcome to Israel. And also, well, Italy in that case also is not bad, but that they said, we're not going to go through any disputed territory. Well, there's no territory that's not disputed in Jerusalem because, as a matter of fact, the Giro organizers said we worked under the instructions of the Italian foreign ministry, but as a matter of fact, even West Jerusalem is disputed because the international community, including Italy, never actually recognized Israel's sovereignty over West Jerusalem because the vote of the UN, which we just discussed, suggested to turn Jerusalem into an international city, which never happened because of the war and the division of the city between Israel and Jordan, but the international community never recognized the de facto partition of Jerusalem between Israel and Jordan. And so, as a matter of fact, people always say, well, the world community does not recognize Israel's sovereignty in East Jerusalem, but neither does it recognize Israel's sovereignty on Western Jerusalem. So if the organizers of the Giro want to avoid any territory that is disputed in Jerusalem, good luck.
And it looks to me as like a nice move by Israeli politicians towards their voters, by a sports and culture minister Miri Regev and tourism minister Yariv Levin. This looks good for them. They'll come to their voters and say, look, we protected the united Jerusalem. At the end of the day, the race will begin in West Jerusalem because that's where it begins.
Right. So obviously, whenever you have ministers or members of Knesset making those kind of statements, at the end of the day, they're politicians, and it just does look good for them vis-a-vis the voters. They put it on their Twitter account, on the Facebook page, saying, look, we stood straight vis-a-vis the Italians and the organizers of the Giro. We won't let them call it West Jerusalem. And then, of course, they score points. At the end of the day, I very much believe that a compromise will be found between the organizers and Israel. Everybody has an interest in keeping this important event. Having the Giro starting from Jerusalem is something very symbolical and that should be maintained, and I'm sure they'll reach a compromise.
Let's hope so. This is an event which doesn't come to Israel every day. Dr. Emmanuel Navon, thank you very much for being with us.